2, 1.
U.S. Army Sergeant Bowe Bergdahl is awaiting sentencing after pleading guilty to desertion and misbehavior before the enemy, which could land him in prison for life. We'll discuss how Barack Obama got us into this mess. Then, Amber Athey and His Eminence Paul Bowe join the panel of deplorables to talk about the woke UPenn TA who refuses to call on her white male students. Lucky kids. Vicious dictator and World Health Organization goodwill ambassador Robert Mugabe. And Snoop Diggity Doodap's latest hip-hop ditty, Make America Crip Again. I'm Michael Knowles, and this is The Michael Knowles Show. We have so much to get to today. We have to analyze this Bowe Bergdahl thing because everybody forgets about these really important political moments like 5 minutes after they pass, and they let Barack Obama off the hook. So we have to get to that. But first, we've got Skillshare. Skillshare is an excellent sponsor. One nice thing about doing this show, other than not having to do any actual work anymore and just talking all day, is that we get free trials of a lot of these great products. Skillshare is the one that is going to change my life, and it'll probably change yours too. It is it's basically like the Netflix for learning new things. So, if you want to get a leg up at work, if you want to take your career to the next level, or if you just want a side hustle, you've got your job, you like your job, but you've got a hobby that you're doing. Maybe you want to make a little money on the side. Or for me, you want to get better at everything you're doing. You got to check out Skillshare. They have a gazillion classes. They have over 3 million members and more than 17,000 classes. That's a real number. 17 classes at your disposal if you sign up. It's the Netflix for online learning. Classes in graphic design, DSLR photography, social media marketing, digital illustration, and much more. They have classes in writing, which I'm now going to need to take, obviously, now that I'm required to write an actual book with words. So I'm looking into that one. They're taught by industry experts, experienced professionals. They're great if you're going to build your career or you're trying out something new. The ones that I really like are all about how to get faster at doing the things you already do. So I read slowly. They have multiple classes on speed reading, on how to just inject your brain with knowledge. Skillshare itself is basically an example of this. They'll have a 3-minute course on how to pick up the basics of a language. They're really, really good. So whatever you want to do, design, photography, marketing, entrepreneurship, check it out. Skillshare is giving my listeners a 1-month free trial of unlimited access to 17,000 classes. So it's not like you get to try one and then 2 lessons in, you have to pay a lot of money or something. You get a month completely free. These classes are pretty quick, so you can get a lot of knowledge in. You would be a big dummy if you don't take advantage of this. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them learn a bunch of new skills. Go over there right now. Go to Skillshare.com/Michael. It's important to put in /Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, because then they'll know that we sent you, and then we get to keep the lights on, and I get to keep Covfefe in my mug. So be sure to go over there, Skillshare.com/Michael, and start your free month trial today. Okay. All right. Now we have to get into the news. We've got this Bowe Bergdahl story. He has pleaded guilty. And I don't know if you remember him, but Bowe Bergdahl is the deserter for whom Barack Obama traded 5 extremely dangerous Taliban operatives. He was being held by the Taliban. He dumped a lot of guys out of Gitmo, high-profile terrorists, to get this guy back. Trump has called Bergdahl a traitor who should be executed in typical Trumpian nuance, and we're awaiting the sentencing now. But it's easy to gloss over all of this recent history. Let's be clear. Barack Obama's radicalism and ineptitude, is what got us here. 6 Americans died looking for this guy when he deserted his post. 5 high-profile terrorists are back in the region, so it's a win-win by Barack Obama's standards. And I actually don't mean that disrespectfully or glibly. This is the deal he wanted. This is the art of the deal, according to Barack Obama. We'll get into why he wanted this deal later. But a traitor, a deserter back in our country, and 5 terrorists back on the battlefield, Barack Obama thought this was a good idea. So let's go to Barack Obama announcing Bergdahl's return in 2014.
Good afternoon, everybody. This morning, I called Bob and Jannie Bergdahl and told them that after nearly 5 years in captivity, their son Bowe is coming home. Sergeant Bergdahl has missed birthdays and holidays and the simple moments with family and friends, which all of us take for granted. But while Bowe was gone, he was never forgotten. His parents thought about him and prayed for him every single day, as did his sister Sky, who prayed for his safe return. He wasn't forgotten by his community in Idaho or the military, which rallied to support the Bergdahls through thick and thin. And he wasn't forgotten by his country, because the United States of America does not ever leave our men and women in uniform behind.
That's the key. So you see, during this press conference, he's careful with his language. He doesn't say, this is a great hero, we're welcoming a hero home, because he knows the guy's a deserter. He knows that the guy's responsible for 6 American soldiers being killed trying to find him. But he's building the case for why we had to trade these huge assets that were being held at Guantanamo Bay, why we had to send them back to Qatar so that we could get this deserter back in our midst. And the last line is the key. He said, we never, as Americans, we never leave our guys on the battlefield. Even if they're deserters, even if they're traitors, we don't leave them on the battlefield. This isn't exactly true. There is a tradition of this going back even to the French and Indian War, even before the country was founded, where we always go, and that's sort of the agreement. You enlist to serve the country, and we make sure that we don't leave you behind. This has not always worked out in practice as it does in theory. During the Civil War, the Union military made attempts to rescue thousands of captured soldiers who were being held in the South. The South had this idea, which was if they captured a black Union soldier, they would enslave him. So the Union Army halted all prisoner exchanges until the South agreed to treat black soldiers the same way they treated white soldiers. This resulted in about 13,000 Union soldiers being killed and dying, while in Confederate captivity. We didn't go and get them. There were certain other considerations that we had to take into account. Obviously, things are not that simple. It's not an automatic rule that the moment someone is in captivity, we send out this battalion and this group of people. There are considerations that have to be made by the military leadership, by the civilian leadership. In World War II, Americans were being held POW in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You might remember those 2 cities because we vaporized them. We blew them to bits. The United States government made that decision knowing that there may very well be American prisoners being held there, but obviously they took into account the 1 million American soldiers who could have died trying to island hop in Japan, trying to go conventionally and defeat Japan finally. So they made that decision. But there were American POWs who got zapped because we had to make certain decisions and because our enemies behaved in a certain way. On the other side, there have been tremendous raids. There was the raid at Cabantuan, I'm sure I'm butchering that, in the Philippines during that war. American forces went into the heart of Japanese forces to save 500 Americans. I'm not suggesting that we don't do this, but it isn't nearly as clear-cut as Barack Obama needs to pretend it is to justify his terrible decision. He goes on.
As part of this effort, the United States is transferring 5 detainees from the prison in Guantanamo Bay to Qatar. The Qatari government has given us assurances that it will put in place measures to protect our national security.
I was going to try to hold a straight face for that. The Qatari government is, because the Qatari, we can really rely on these guys, right? They're going to protect American national security, one of the largest state sponsors of terrorism in the world, tied to the al-Nusra Front, tied to al-Qaeda, tied to Hamas, tied to ISIS. But don't worry, folks. We're going to send back some of the most high-profile terrorists in the world to one of the largest state sponsors of terror in the world and one of the richest countries in the region. But it's okay. Probably nothing will happen. It'll all go just fine. He goes on.
I'd like to say to Bowe right now, who's having trouble speaking English, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Zayabayem. I'm your father, Bowe. The people of Afghanistan, the same. Khalifa al-Thani, the complicated nature of this recovery will never really be comprehended.
So that was Bowe Bergdahl's father speaking at that press conference. Obama has Bergdahl's parents on either side of him. And I'm not going to beat up on him too much. His son was taken captive. I don't know what goes through a guy's head. I don't know what drives him to think the things he does or behave the way he does. He does invoke Allah at this press conference, which raised a lot of eyebrows. He does have a very kind of terroristy looking beard that he grew out, ostensibly to understand what his son was going through. Perfectly understandable. There was a deleted tweet that he had sent out which said, quote, "I am still working to free all Guantanamo prisoners. God will repay for the death of every Afghan child. Amen." He also retweeted a bunch of enemy propaganda about the United States. This was not a good-looking press conference for Barack Obama, and it raises a lot of questions. Was Bowe Bergdahl sympathizing with the enemy when he was in Afghanistan? Is that what prompted him to desert? What are his parents, or his father at least, seems to have been sympathizing with the enemy during the captivity, though we can't really know. It all, as Bergdahl's father says, it was a complicated process to get this guy out. I think that is the understatement of the century. The complications that he's alluding to here are ideological complications, both for Barack Obama's radical ideology and perhaps the ideology of those who are sympathizing with the enemy. Here is Mike Flynn before he was thrown under the bus because of this Russia probe. Here's Mike Flynn, who had knowledge of the circumstances, explaining it.
So for the first 24 to 72 hours, I mean, we were in crisis operations, and I was personally diverting every single capability, human intelligence-wise, to signals intelligence, to unmanned aerial vehicles, to space-based systems. I mean, we really turned on to find this soldier.
So you believe, sir, that he did walk off the base with the intention of meeting the Taliban?
Absolutely.
Nobody now suggests that he didn't. At the time, it was hotly disputed. He's not a deserter. This is Republican propaganda to attack President Obama. Now, he did. He deserted. He walked off of the base. Barack Obama kind of leaned into that and defended that at the time anyway. And President Trump, in his typical understatement, nuanced way, made this an issue of the campaign.
Take Sergeant Bergdahl. Does anybody remember that name? So this is the way we think. So we get a traitor named Bergdahl, a dirty, rotten traitor, who, by the way, when he deserted, 6 young, beautiful people were killed trying to find him, right? And you don't even hear about him anymore. Somebody said the other day, well, he had some psychological problems. Well, you know, in the old days, bing, bong, when we were strong. So we get Bergdahl, a traitor, and they get 5 of the people that they most wanted anywhere in the world, 5 killers that are right now back on the battlefield doing a job. That's the kind of deals we make. That's the kind of deals we make, right? Am I right?
Typical Trumpian sobriety.
Obama would be really bad at Settlers of Catan.
I don't even know what that game is. We got to stop hiring kids to do this show. Donald Trump is there. He's got, if you couldn't hear on the Bing Bong, he's making the image of a rifle. So he's suggesting that we kill traitor, we just execute them. Fair enough. The 6 Americans that died looking for Bergdahl are... you don't hear their names a lot. You hear Bowe Bergdahl's name. You don't hear their names. It's Staff Sergeant Clayton Bowen, Private First Class Morris Walker, Staff Sergeant Kurt Curtis, Second Lieutenant Darren Andrews, Staff Sergeant Michael Murphy, and Private First Class Matthew Martinek. So 6 guys go out there trying to find this guy, and we trade him for the Taliban 5, called by John McCain the hardest of the hardcore, all 5 deemed high risk to the United States. So why did Barack Obama do it? 2 words, Guantanamo Bay. Underscored in Bowe Bergdahl's father's tweet. He did it because he made it a plank of his first campaign to close Guantanamo Bay. He said, we're going to close it. It's not constitutional. It's not in the ideals of America. We have to get rid of it. It didn't happen. He realized he couldn't do it because the worst people on the face of the earth were being held captive there. So Barack Obama saw an excuse to trade 5 terrorists for this deserter to bring him back. I'm sure if he could have, he would have traded 10 for the deserter because the incentives here were so perverse for Barack Obama. He didn't view it as a letdown to let these people out. He had been looking for a way to empty that prison, openly so, since 2008. He campaigned on it. This is not some crazy conspiracy theory. He told us exactly what he wanted to do, and then we got, as Donald Trump said perfectly, some of that speech that he gave about Bowe Bergdahl was not articulate, to say the least, talking about Bing Bang and a dirty, rotten traitor. Maybe he shouldn't have used that language, but he got it exactly right when he talked about Barack Obama's art of the deal. Those are the kind of deals that we get because of Barack Obama's radicalism, because of his radical ideology, an ideology that says that we are the cause of a lot of troubles in the world. We're not protecting the world. We're causing a lot of troubles. We need to get out of other people's business. We can't have these awful terrorists in Guantanamo Bay. It's not right. It's wrong. Let them all out. And that's the result that you get. And unfortunately now there's a new sheriff in town, and Bowe Bergdahl appears to be getting what he deserves, but we'll have to wait for sentencing. Before the sentencing, we have to bring on our panel. We have an excellent panel today of His Eminence Paul Bowe and of the Daily Caller's Amber Athey. Thanks for coming on. So,
thanks for having us on.
Your Eminence, happy birthday, by the way. It was your birthday on Saturday.
Oh, thank you.
Paul Bowe, was it worth it? 6 dead Americans, 5 terrorists in enemy hands. This sounds like a loaded question, but it really isn't, because you do have to take into account leaving a man on the field. Mm-hmm. Was it worth it so that we didn't leave this guy on the battlefield?
I would say that the righteous law of leaving no man behind fell completely out the window the second he deserted his squadron and put the lives of American soldiers at risk. So I believe the intensity to retrieving him severely lowers at that point, and trading five terrorists for him, for someone who deserted his base and people died as a result of it? Absolutely not, no.
But is it worth trying to get him at least? Sure, he's a dirty, rotten terrorist, as Trump says, but he's still our guy, even if he deserts. You can't desert for long, pal. We'll get you. Maybe we shouldn't have traded 5 terrorists for him, but should it be the policy of the United States to always go after guys that we lose on the field?
I would agree. It still should be in our policy and our priority to get him back. But like I said, the intensity by which we do it severely goes down when they desert and put other Americans at risk.
Fair enough, and maybe we don't give up 5 of the worst guys on earth. Maybe we only give up 3. Amber, do people understand that Barack Obama did this intentionally? Do people get that this was a strategic decision, or will his radicalism be whitewashed by history and he'll just be a sort of amiable, middle-of-the-roader when historians look back?
I don't think people fully understand that this was clearly just a ploy, as you said, to close Guantanamo Bay, because when he first talked about doing that, the normal person's reaction was, well, what are you going to do with all of these terrorists that are there? And this was a really easy way for him to just get rid of 5 of them. But the problem is that history always looks more favorably upon past presidents, unless, of course, you're George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, in which case liberals will try to tear down your statues. But I mean, let's look at some of the other Obama era scandals. People aren't talking about Fast and Furious anymore. The only reason they're talking about Benghazi is because they want the incident with Niger to be Trump's Benghazi. So I think this is just going to be another example of things being whitewashed throughout history, and Obama's going to be considered the perfect moderate Democrat.
Just on that point, that awful congresswoman with the silly hats, Frederica Wilson, who completely politicized this fallen American hero, LaDavid Johnson, she has said that this is Trump's Benghazi. She's saying that Trump's alleged impoliteness on the telephone, which we don't have a ton of reason to believe was impolite because we've heard other calls of his to Gold Star families, but she's saying this alleged impoliteness, this is his version of Benghazi. The best part about that statement is that it acknowledges that Benghazi was Benghazi. It acknowledges that was finally a Democrat is admitting that was a terrible scandal that rightly plagued Hillary Clinton and plagues her today. People seem to be missing that point, that in her criticizing Trump, she's acknowledging how bad Benghazi was. Sad.
Yeah, which makes herself look so silly because she only has tweeted about Benghazi twice. She tweeted about it once the other day when she said this was Trump's Benghazi, and then she tweeted about it when it very first happened to offer her condolences to the families of the soldiers who died. So there's a huge silence in there. So if she's going to sit here and say Benghazi was a big deal now, she's just making herself look idiotic.
Hold on, you're telling me that a woman who wears sequined cowboy hats on the floor of the United States Congress, she might look a little silly? I don't believe it. This is the
Shocking,
intrepid
isn't it?
reporting at the Michael Knowles Show. Okay, we've got a lot more to talk about. We've got to talk about woke TAs and white males and goodwill ambassador Robert Mugabe. But you can't watch any of that if you don't subscribe to the Daily Wire. We've got to say goodbye to Facebook and YouTube. To everyone who already subscribes, thank you very much. It keeps the lights on. It keeps my coffee full of covfefe, or my Leftist Tears tumbler, rather, full of covfefe. So we really appreciate it. But come on over to the Daily Wire. It's $10 a month, $100 a year. You get me, you get the Andrew Klavan Show, you get the Ben Shapiro Show, yada, yada, yada. Who cares, right? But you get this. And you can't get this anywhere else. You just have to subscribe. It's the only place to get your
What's it made out of
leftist
today,
tears.
Michael?
Well, it's always made out of the hardest metals on Earth, which we have concocted here in the Daily Wire laboratories of crushed up Steve Cratter mugs. So we have this is absolutely the scientific cutting edge. It holds delicious leftist tears. Now we're serving up a vintage of Frederica Wilson. So we've got it's really good. There's some sequins in there, so watch that it doesn't get stuck in your teeth or your throat. But otherwise, it's either hot or cold, always salty and delicious leftist tears. Go over to dailywire.com right now. We'll be right back.